If you were with me last week, you heard the first part of this story about my incredible friend, Dr. Elwin Ransom. Since that time, even I have become aware of the presence of spiritual beings and the fact that there really is a battle between good and evil going on all around us. Ransom says that it's invisible and spiritual now, but may very soon become visual and physical. I don't know what he means by that. If you want a full account of how 1 minute he was in a cottage in the English countryside, and the next minute he was hurling through space on his second journey to another planet, you will have to read the official account that he and I put together afterwards. For now, it is enough for you to know that he had been summoned to do God's will in that far world, on some other planet, though he had no idea what he was supposed to do once he got there. He was transported in a container just big enough for him to fit in. It had thick walls and was all of one piece, as if it had been carved out of a single block of some translucent material that looked like mother of pearl. To be honest, it reminded me of a giant casket, and we never did learn how it was propelled. He says he doesn't remember much about that journey. He may have been in a state of suspended animation, but he remembered that near the end of the voyage, he regained the sense of down, the sense that he was falling down. Down and down he went, until suddenly there was a slight bump, and the light bleeding in through the container changed from a golden bronze to a dark green. And then a curious thing happened. He began to move slowly back upwards again, and then slowly down, and then slowly back up again, almost in a rhythm. And then he noticed that the walls were becoming more and more translucent. And then he saw the reason. The container was melting, turning from a hard stone-like substance into a viscous gel. It was dissolving by the second. He pushed against the walls, and the whole thing fell apart like wet cardboard, and he was instantly engulfed in some cold, refreshing liquid. He swam to the surface, and this is what he saw. A sea of green, pure and clean, like emerald crystal. He was out in the middle of an ocean with no land in sight, in the middle of nowhere. And yet, for some reason, he felt no fear. Rather, he felt refreshed and invigorated. The swells of the giant waves would have been impossible here on Earth. He would slowly rise 1,000 feet in the air and then drop down 1,000 feet on the other side of the wave. The waves were literally the size of small mountains. He took a small sip of the water. It wasn't salty. It was fresh. In fact, it was delicious. There came a moment when an exceptionally large wave picked him up, and as he rose up on the top of its crest, he looked out over the ocean and saw, a couple thousand feet away, something floating on the surface of the sea. It was quite large but quite thin, maybe an acre wide but only a couple feet thick, like a skin or a mat laying on the water. It was very flexible, conforming to the shape of the water that it rode on. It disappeared behind the latest wave. He swam in the direction he last saw it, and as he rode up on the peak of the next wave, he looked down and saw way below him in the valley the floating island. He swam as hard as he could as he flew down the backside of the wave towards it. He caught hold of the fringe or the skirt of the floating island. It was made of some kind of vegetation, tubes and strings and bladders, like a much larger version of the seaweed you find washed up along the beach. Grabbing hard, he pulled himself up on top to the sound of popping bladders and hissing waters, and when he got on top, he found that it was dry. The ground was made up of a tight mesh of interwoven fibers and roots, creating this giant floating raft. There was a beautiful quilt work of colored vegetation with things like heather and bushes and trees whose trunks were more like giant tubes. There were beautiful spicy scents in the air, the gentle rocking of the seas, a warm, gentle breeze, and like a mother comforting her child, the island rocked him to sleep. When he woke up the next day, he was hungry. He walked into a forest and found fruit hanging from a tree and took a bite. It was delicious. It was beyond delicious. It was so good that he desired more, even though he was no longer hungry. But then he felt a warning not to take more, to accept the good gift that he had stumbled upon, but not to try and repeat the experience, not to try to collect or store up the fruit, to be content with what he had encountered. He walked to the edge of the island and looked out. There were lots of other islands, some of them many times larger than his own, and all sometimes drifting together to form a temporary continent, or other times floating apart on their own. Another island came so close to his own that just a tiny strip of sea lay in between them. As the waves rolled beneath them, one minute that strip looked like a river deep down in the valley of a well-wooded forest. The next moment, it was above him, like a mountain cataract pouring down. If you had taken a photograph at any one instant, the land would have looked like the wooded valleys and mountains of our own world. But in that world, the landscape was constantly changing. The same wave never came twice. Everything was in a state of flux beyond your control. You had to take each wave as it came to you. And each island was different, with different kinds of fruit and forests on it. And you never knew when it would be close enough that you could visit it. You never knew what the next day would bring to you. The whole world felt alive and vibrant and vital, growing, changing, becoming, unfolding one day at a time. And Ransom felt strangely at home, at peace, reinvigorated. And he wondered why he had been sent to this ever-changing paradise, and what role he was to play on this strange young planet called Perelandra. So begins this second book of C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, Perelandra. When he's first there, those first days, he doesn't see anyone else. And he wonders, am I the only person on this planet? And then a couple days later, far in the distance, he sees another human. It looks like a human. He's not sure. It's on another island so far away. And slowly, those two islands come together until he sees it's a woman. And she's young, and she's strong, and she's curious, and she's beautiful, and she's naked, and she's green. And he had been shipped to this planet naked himself, and neither of them felt any shame. Sound familiar? As time goes on, he comes to realize that this person he's dealing with is Eve, of Adam and Eve, the Eve of this other planet. And sometimes he can't even bear to look at her because she is literally innocent. She is looking for the king, the Adam of this world. They were on two different floating islands and they ended up drifting apart, and she's looking for him. As Ransom looks at her, he's overwhelmed. She is the mother of all who will come. She is the queen. She is literally innocent. No resentment, no concern, no fear, no worry. She simply delights in being. She delights in walking with her Maker through the days of her life. In fact, she has such a noble spirit that at times he can't even bear to look at her. He feels unworthy. He kind of looks down at the ground. What would it be like to look in the face of someone who had no regret, no bitterness, no shame, no self-consciousness, no guarded language, no social maneuvering? And notice in this long description you've heard that Lewis's vision of Eden isn't this static, frozen, no, it's this unfolding of life. Everything's moving, it's in flux. Everything is becoming, everything is growing, everything is vibrant. This is the world that this woman, who he calls her the Green Lady, lives in. And it's magnificent. There comes a day when she and he are talking, and suddenly they see this meteor streaking across the sky. It's on fire, and then it goes into the ocean. A minute later, from that direction comes a wave, and their whole island goes up and down, and they realize something from the outside has come into this world. It turns out it's Weston. If you were with us last week, this arrogant scientist has created a second ship and has traveled into this second planet. He has come again. And when he meets Ransom, he says, "Oh, no, you don't understand. Everything's changed. I'm a different man now from the one you met me. Before I believed in materialist philosophy. I believed all there was stuff. I didn't buy into the spirit stuff. But I've changed. My horizons have widened. Oh, no, now I believe in the spiritual world. Now, not any of the traditional religions, of course, but I have a sense of a life force, of this unrolling, unveiling of a spiritual power. And it's manifesting itself through human history, and it's full of power, and it's becoming. And I want to become part of that." And so he literally asks this spirit into him and becomes possessed by the devil. Lucifer has used him and his pride and his body to travel out of our silent planet into this virginal planet, to bring misery there, to bring heartache there. We watch in this book the temptation in the garden, in a watery, floating garden. And just like here, the devil uses exactly the same tricks. Always a kernel of truth in every lie, and always repeating again and again and again the same thing, hoping on the 99th time she'll finally give in. She'll finally give in. You may wonder, why have you spent so much time telling us about this story and describing what it looked like? Here's why. I believe this book allows us to feel, experience the profound truths of the scriptures, starting with the nature of evil. Note that the devil doesn't create his own planet. He comes into what has already been created and comes to bend and twist it to his own desires. This is the truth about all evil. Evil is not the equal and the opposite of good. Evil is good bent. Evil can't create. To create is a good thing. Evil can only take what is created and then bend it, twist it, distort it, corrupt it for its own purposes. If you think about someone you know who is evil, or you think about the nature of lies, you will see this. Think about lies. Language and speech is a beautiful thing. What does a lie do? It takes language and twists it and corrupts it for its own purposes. But here's the thing. The fall, and that's what I'm trying to talk about to help you understand this classic Christian understanding of the fall. The fall means to fall down, to fall from the exalted state of the green lady that we just talked about. This beautiful, powerful woman in innocence, to fall from that into the state of ransom, which is the state of all of us, full of arrogance and self-righteousness and fears and desires and corruption and hate. We call it the fall, and we say it's due to original sin, which people get freaked out about. But think about this. Think about hereditary diseases, how they're passed down from one generation to the next. This defect. Well, in the same way, the idea of original sin is simply that every one of our decisions has consequences. Every one of our choices not only affects us, it affects everyone else. Like a rock dropped in a pond, there's ripple effects from all our choices. What my great-great-grandfathers did has an effect generations down in some way. And so it makes sense, this idea of original sin means our original ancestors chose what? To take the good gift given and bend it, twist it. So God in his mercy gave us the beautiful gift of free will, to be able to choose for ourselves. What does that mean? Well, it's like giving an adolescent boy either a car or a chainsaw or a table saw, or an adolescent girl. You give them this thing, it's extremely powerful, and it means it can be used the right way for beautiful things, or terrible things can happen if you use it the wrong way. Well, that's what our free will is, and our ancestors chose it to despise God, to reject God, to turn away from God, to listen to the devil instead of the love of God, and say, no, we're going to set up on our own. We're good. No, I don't need any of that. I'm good all by myself. That's what we refer to as that original sin. But here's the thing, you guys. The fall, and this is what I want to talk about today, the fall is not just about our morals. It's not like, we used to not do bad things and now we do bad things. No, it's a whole twisting and distorting of our very nature. And what that does is it affects not only our morals, it affects my relationship to life. It affects my relationship to other people. It affects my relationship to time. To time. Think about this woman I've described and how she is just at peace in being who she is. And then think about yourself and think about me. We don't know how to just be. We are not very content. We are not very good at living in the present and just being in the present. Now, think about that planet we described with these floating islands. Imagine that each one of those islands is a day in your life. Everyone is different. As the waves come, the island changes, right? So what was once flat comes up and becomes a mountain, the wave passes, and now you're looking down into a wooden valley. It has highs and lows, just like a day of your life. Think about your life. Every day is unique because no wave comes more than once. And as the wave comes, it changes. And you find yourself experiencing a day with highs and lows, or maybe you had a flat day. There was no waves that day. Imagine that how you experience the days of your life is those floating islands, and the flow of time is the waves beneath them. That we ride on the waves of time. Think about what it was like for the green lady, Eve. She experiences a wave, and then she can't wait for the next. It's not going to be the same. It's going to be different. But it's all given from God, and she can't wait. How do we experience time? Like it's always running out. Like we see a wave go under us, and then we're pining, we're wishing it could come back. We want to stop the wave. We want to keep the wave.
Or maybe it's a bad time and we want to get it by us as fast as we can. The green lady is living in the present, in the moment. She knows how to live that way. Why don't we? Well, part of it is because we have a subconscious fear of death. We feel time is running out. So for us, it's a scarce resource we never have enough of. For her, it's the next wave, and I can't wait to see what the next one is, and the next one. Think about trying to do a 5-year plan on that planet. You don't even know where your backyard's going to be tomorrow. Like, you don't know where the islands are going to be. You don't know what resources you're going to have. How do you plan? All you can do is wake up in the morning and take the gift given. All you can do is walk through the day that's been given in front of you. Now, Ransom looks at her, and she's so at peace, and he really can't quite get it. And he's kind of, I think, feeling maybe a little bit envious. Because you see, the way that we see time has a lot to do with our level of disappointment. Let me say that again. The way you see and understand time has a lot to do with how much disappointment you will experience in your life. He tries to explain this to her. He says, well, when things don't go your way, or they don't go the way you expected them to go, don't you feel disappointment? Think about the disappointment that comes from being a creature trapped in time, unable to make things go the way we want them to go. Now, you'd think she'd hear this and get depressed. Instead, her eyes open wide, and she's full of joy. And she says, oh, you've made me see something I never saw before. She says this, and this is a quote from the book. Oh, I see it now. One goes into the forest to pick food, and already the thought of one fruit rather than another is grown up in one's mind. Then, it may be, one finds a different fruit, not the fruit that one was thinking of. One joy was expected, and another is given. But this I had never noticed before, that at that very moment of finding, there in my mind, there's a kind of thrusting back or a setting aside the picture of the fruit that you have not found. But for a moment, it's still there before you. And if you wished, although no one would ever wish to do so, if you wished, you could keep it there. You could send your soul after the good you had expected instead of turning to the good that's been given to you. You could refuse the real good. You could make the real fruit taste insipid by thinking of this other. Oh, and the glory and the wonder you have made me see is that it is I myself, who turned from the good expected to the given good. Out of my own heart I do it. One can conceive of a heart which did not do that, which clung to the good it had first thought of, and turned the good which was given to it into no good at all. And now I see, I had thought that I was carried in the will of him I love, God. But now I see that I walk with it. I thought that the good things he sent me drew me into them. But now I see that it is I who plunge into them, just as I plunge into the waves and use my own arms and my own legs for swimming. How has he made me so separated from himself? How did it enter into his mind to conceive such a thing? Oh, the glory of it. I thought we went along paths, but it seems there are no paths. The going itself is the path. And Ransom then asked her, yeah, but have you no fear that it will ever be hard for you to turn your heart from the thing you wanted to the thing that God sends? And the question makes no sense to her. She can't even understand it because she just delights in obeying God. She delights in being in his presence. She's absolutely brilliant. But all the time she says, well, I don't quite know that yet. But God knows best. God knows best. So, with all that I've just said and we've shared and we've seen, think about everything we've heard and how she said the going itself is the path And then listen now to our scripture for this morning. Listen to how she lives out Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 to 7. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil." So let's unpack this. First, this does not mean turn off your brain. This does not mean you shouldn't think. It means exactly what it says. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Think about politicians today. Think about protesters today. Think about every one of us today. How many of us act wise in our own eyes? Like we see it all. And the people we don't like and the people we disagree with, they don't see. We see it all. Don't be wise in your own eyes. In the book of Romans, Paul actually looked back at the whole creation story, and he describes it this way. Thinking themselves to be wise, they became fools, which is exactly what happened to Weston and Devine in these novels. Okay, so it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Why? Because God is good. He is trustworthy. Because even if he doesn't send us the good we wanted, he will still provide other goods that we didn't imagine. Because our hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness, which means our hope is built on nothing less than God's saving, redeeming faithfulness. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Acknowledge him as the Lord of my life and the King of my heart in all ways, in every dimensions of my life, in my morals, in my finances, in how I spend my time, in what I stand up for, in my relationships, in every way that I can be a human being, acknowledging that God is present there and he is to be the Lord there. Look at that next phrase, and he shall direct your paths. It's not that God shows us all the full future. Waves rise up and block the horizon and cut off our vision. But as the green lady said, the going is the path. The path is wherever I walk with God, one day at a time. The path unfolds before me as I take each step with God as Lord. But when I go my own way, when I set myself up as a little mini God, then I go off the path. And then depart from evil means to get back on the path with God. I am to obey God and reject the siren call of the evil one towards pride and selfishness and cruelty and hate and despising. In Perelandra, the unfallen lady delights that God shall direct her paths. But we, us, here on this side of the fall, we struggle with this and we want control. Remember the story of how Ransom tasted that fruit for the first time in that garden. He tastes the fruit and it's so amazing. He's like, this is the best thing ever. I just want more. And even though he was already full and he'd had enough, he still wanted more. And then he started thinking, how could I store it up? How could I treasure it up so then I could have it whenever I wanted? And the Spirit of God warns him. Says, do not do that. Don't try and control it. Accept the gift that's been given. In another scene in the book, he's walking through another forest, and he sees these trees that are blowing bubbles. It's like a bubble forest. And he bumps into one, and it bursts on him, and it showers over him these incredible spicy fragrances, and it renews him, and it refreshes him, and he feels so good. He goes, that was awesome. Man, if that's what one would do, what if I ran through 10 at the same time? And he's just about to do it. And again, the Spirit of God warns him, no. No, don't try and hoard this. Don't try and store it up. Don't try and control the unfolding of time. Celebrate what was given to you. Let it be enough. Move on to that next thing. Be content with this gift that's been given to you. We are so tempted to focus on the what could have been, what should have been, what might have been, what could be, rather than turning into the actual, the real, the present moment, and the particular gifts that are only found in this present moment. that I will miss if I'm too busy looking backwards or too busy looking forwards. The gift that's given to me in this day. We want to be the masters of our own destiny. And so, and I'm quoting here Sanford Schwartz, and so we are tempted to deny our time-bound human condition and thereby defect from the developing stream of actual life, to defect from the actual life that God is unfolding and turn instead to self-deceptive fictions, which being unreal are unlife, which being unreal are close to nothingness, in fact close to the void of the eternal darkness. In the book, Ransom says this: the itch, what is it? It's the itch to have things over again, as if life were a film that could be unrolled twice or even made to work backwards. Was this possibly the root of all evil? No, of course, it's the love of money that was called the root of all evil, but money itself. Perhaps we value it chiefly as a defense against chance, a security for being able to have things over and over again, a means of arresting the unrolling of the film of time. This trying to control, this stance of trying to keep everything in control and force the future into what I want, compared to a stance of let it be, or what will be, will be. That is the chief source of much of our frustration, our lack of contentment, even our hopelessness, when the gift given is not the gift we were looking for. It's a scarcity model. It's a scarcity model approach to life. We are terrified that there won't be enough. We are tempted to store up and hoard up resources in an attempt to control the future, to control time, to be a mini God in our own lives. What if our greed was actually a form of fear? What if what's behind greed is fear that there won't be enough, or I won't get enough, or you can never have enough? What if God won't meet my needs? We store up treasures, or we despair because we're not able to store up treasures. And we look at people who are storing up treasures, and then we envy them because actually we want to do the same thing. And believe me, my name is all over this. But now listen to what Jesus says to us. In Matthew chapter 6, 19 to 22. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. Well, what does all this mean? Well, notice that Jesus mentions three things that will drain you of your earthly treasures: moth, rust, and thieves. To me, moths are particular circumstances I can't control. Like either moths get in or they don't. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Stuff just happens, and we don't know when or where. That's just the way it is to be a human being in a fallen, broken world. Rust. Rust, to me, is the inevitable decay of the human world. It's entropy. It's entropy. Everything is falling apart. Stuff always gets old and wears out or fades away. Rust never sleeps. It is an inherent part of the physical world. Bread goes stale, colors fade, sand slips through my hands. We were never meant to hold on and to try and freeze things, like trying to stop the waves from coming. We were meant to enjoy the wave in the moment and then to turn to embrace the next wave, which of course will be different. And thieves to me is a reminder that we live in a world of human sin, willful acts of fallen, broken people like me, like you, because we're all bent. We all have that disease I talked about. Some people are way more bent than others. Some people, you might say, they're so good, they're almost asymptomatic, but they carry the gene. We're all stained with this. And so I got to look at myself as, in what ways do even I act as a thief sometimes? We can't escape the sinfulness of this world. There will never be a nirvana this side of heaven. You will never have enough money, enough stuff, enough friends, enough time to be in a static, permanent, safe nirvana. Loss is inevitable in this world. But we can choose to view it as a series of waves, as the wave that passes me by, realizing a new and unexpected wave is coming, and that all is gift, or I can be crippled by it. Look at that last line about the eyes of the body and what does all that mean? Well, I think that our story today actually helps us understand what this verse really means, even though scholars and theologians have been arguing about it forever. It really matters the way I look at things. Do I look at them with the right eyes? Do I look at time as a gift unfolding and given to me new every morning, or do I view it as a scarce commodity to be hoarded or manipulated so I can be the God of my life? Do I see human nature for what it really is? Precious but fallen. Do you see how this idea of original sin and the fall helps us understand the actual people we live with and see and encounter? Because you look at them and you see some really beautiful things in them, like good and beautiful. And then you look at other parts of them in other days and you're like, they're mean, they're nasty, why is that? Because the original image of God, the original goodness is still there. But there's parts of it that are bent and distorted in every one of us. None of us gets out of that without some sort of bending. And following Jesus is the unbending of my corruption, right? It's me turning away from these twisted, distorted ways and entering into the full life that he has called me to have. I'm precious, but I'm fallen. So can I look at myself objectively and see both my own dignity and my own failures and my own arrogance? Can I see it all? Will I see myself as wise and self-sufficient and in no need of God's help and guidance? Or will I see myself as what I am, a dependent creature, like the green lady, a creature who desperately needs to walk through his days with his Creator? Do I look at the gift given as unique and precious, or do I despise it and so unenjoy it because it wasn't the gift I wanted? Will I look at obedience to God and choosing to do what is good and right and choosing to go in the direction he is leading me as a wonderful adventure, or as a burden, as raining on my parade? One way of looking at things fills my whole body with light, the light of God's love. The other way of looking at things fills my body and soul with the darkness of my self-rule, rather than letting the maker of heaven and earth rule me. One way of looking fills my eyes with light and joy and looking forward to the waves that come next, and the other leaves me with bitterness and frustration and resentment. Which will I choose? I want to live like the green lady. Sonata? I want to live like the green lady. This may sound funny, but I want to live in her ways. Somehow that scripture in Matthew where Jesus tells us not to store up treasure here on earth, it gets to me. It's exactly the advice that the green lady would give to me. When you think about her and everything we heard and saw today, the Lord was the king of her heart, and she delighted in all his ways. She was utterly dependent on him, and so in reality, utterly free. By being utterly obedient to him, she's actually utterly free, because she's free from the bondage of sin. Now, This might sound funny to you, but here's the truth. As I was thinking about this story today and imagining her on that far planet and what life would be like, I gotta admit, I really would like to go there. I would really like to be there. But also, I was thinking about the scripture we just heard in Proverbs, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. It occurred to me, we have a praise song that we do right here that could be the Green Lady's theme song. I mean, this song kind of just radiates the stance that she had in life. This stance, this attitude, this set of convictions that fill your soul with the light of God's love instead of the darkness of self-rule. So here's how I want to end today. We're going to end by worshiping. We're going to take this song that many of you know, and we're going to sing it, both as a prayer and as a declaration of who God is and who we choose to be. Amen.
in